Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel, and today I'm going to be counting down 10 rock and metal bands who should reunite and 5 that shouldn't. The way I'm going to do this here is I'm going to start my top 10 of bands who should reunite, and once we get to the top 5, then I'm going to go back and forth between bands who should and shouldn't. So that said, let's get started here with my number 10, bands who should. Getting things started here, number 10, let's go with White Zombie, a band who I feel definitely should reunite at some point, but they're also a group with a ton of bad blood, mostly directed towards Rob Zombie over financial issues, so it's unlikely that all 4 members would get back together if not for, some kind of a reunion for charity or something like that, but, taking into account the fact that Rob Zombie is also a very successful solo artist, it's highly unlikely that we would see a White Zombie reunion, but crazier things have happened, and, I think a reunion for the fans who have continued to support the members of the group over the years would be amazing, and I think, long story short, if the Misfits are able to reunite, if Axl and Slash are able to reunite, White Zombie could do the same as well, and I can't think of a more appropriate time to do so than soon, seeing that their most successful record commercially, this album right here, Astro Creep 2000, turns 30 years old in 2025. Number 9, KK Downing with Judas Priest. Now, KK Downing has been ousted from the band for many years. He left the group. There was some bad blood, some tension. He was not let back in. They replaced him with Richie Faulkner on guitar, and Richie Faulkner does a fantastic job, so I'm not advocating for him to replace Richie Faulkner, but, I think almost a 3-guitar trio would be fantastic in Judas Priest at this point, especially if their next record is going to see the band moving in a more progressive direction. Of course, KK would reunite with the band at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year, and it sounded fantastic. I did a whole video sharing my thoughts on that and whether or not it was time for a reunion, and I doubled down on that. I think it's absolutely time for a reunion with KK back in the band. I think it could only add more firepower to the band's live set, no pun intended. So, for me, KK Downing, one of the all-time best metal guitarists, and I think him joining up with Richie Faulkner and Andy Sneap would make for a great guitar trio for Judas Priest in the future. But then you also have to take into account KK's Priest, the band that he started with Ripper Owens, among other musicians here recently, right? Their first album, Sermons of the Sinner, was really great stuff from 2021, and now they have another album coming out this September called The Sinner Rides Again. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and I'm in no way advocating for KK's Priest to stop. I think, continuing with KK's Priest as a side project while also joining Judas Priest as a full-time member once again is probably the ideal scenario here, but there's no doubt with Glenn Tipton in the state that he's in these days, KK Downing returning to the band would be a necessary fit, I think, for Judas Priest at this point. I think every fan would love to see it, so for me, I'd love to see KK rejoin Judas Priest while continuing KK's Priest as a side project. Sticking with Judas Priest here, let's go with Fight, the side project of Rob Halford that he started after his departure from the band in 1991. And, for me personally, I love Fight. This album here, War of Words, their debut, is incredible. Not a bad song on this record. Really, seems to pick up right where Painkiller left off musically. And, great record here. So for me, I really enjoy this era of Rob Halford's career with Fight. And I think, a reunion, a side project with, the Fight reunion here, of course, while Halford is continuing to front Judas Priest, would be a really cool thing, something that I think is long overdue, and something that Halford has not ruled out either. He has not ruled out a reunion with Fight at some point, so I think for Fight to come back as a side project of Rob Halford's while he continues to front Judas Priest would be an amazing thing. Really heavy stuff from the 2 albums they released, and I'd love to see them once again reunite, do some live sets. I think that'd be really cool. Following that up here with my number 7, let's go with REM. While all 4 members of the band are still alive and well and on good terms with one another, I think I can speak on behalf of a lot of REM fans when I say it'd be really cool to see the band back on stage together once again, although Michael Stipe has been vocal about not wanting to get the band back together to be a nostalgia act, but Peter Buck still releases new music, and Michael Stipe does put out some solo stuff occasionally, so it's not that their creativity is no longer there. So with that said, they don't necessarily have to be a nostalgia act. I think they definitely could have more to offer in the future if they did decide to reunite. I think it's something that, again, a lot of fans would be interested in seeing. Number 6, how about the Police? This is a situation of all 4 members, again, being alive and well, and, there's always seems to be a lot of tension between the guys, but the Police's reunion in the mid-2000s was, at the time, the 3rd highest grossing tour of all time, right at that point. So, one last reunion tour in 2023 would no doubt make a ton of money and move a lot of tickets, and I would very much be interested in seeing how the band went about that if they did decide to reunite at some point. The final tour that they went on in the mid-2000s was cool, but now years have passed, and I think there's definitely a demand for the Police to return, so I think it'd be a really interesting scenario if the Police did decide to come back, and I'd definitely be, all for it. Coming in at number 5 here, Twisted Sister should definitely reunite at some point. Of course, wouldn't be the same without their drummer, who unfortunately passed away years ago, AJ Pirro. But besides the loss of AJ Pirro, the band are still fantastic live. They recently reunited at the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame for their induction, and they sounded absolutely killer. They will be reuniting again for some political rallies in 2024, which I'm definitely looking forward to hearing those performances. So hopefully that does get the ball rolling on some sort of a reunion with Twisted Sister. They're one of those bands that, I never got to see live, so selfishly, I really do want to see them in a live setting, so that's probably a major reason why they're on this list here. But Twisted Sister, one of my all-time favorite bands, right? Dee Snider still has a great voice. The band still sounded really tight at the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame induction, so I would love nothing more than to have the opportunity to see Twisted Sister live and think that, if they were interested in doing it, they definitely did still have the abilities to, go out there and provide a killer show. Now that we're in the top 5, let's talk about some bands that should not reunite. So that said, let's go with David Gilmour and Roger Waters reuniting Pink Floyd and that classic lineup. It'll be epic to see, once again, David Gilmour and Roger Waters sharing the stage one more time, but with all of the bad blood between the two of them, especially now recently, it's really started to heat up once again earlier this year. It's a reunion that's never going to happen, and quite frankly, it probably should not happen as long as David and Roger hate each other so much, and I think that their rivalry would no doubt make for a miserable tour for all involved. So would it be great to see the classic Pink Floyd back once again, live in a tour setting like that? I think it'd be fantastic, but it's something that we know is never going to happen, and as long as there's so much bad blood between David and Roger, it's probably for the best that it shouldn't. Number 4, back to bands that should reunite. Let's go with the surviving members of Van Halen for a one-off performance here. The fact that we haven't seen an Eddie Van Halen tribute show yet, featuring the likes of Wolfgang Van Halen, David Lee Roth, Michael Anthony, Alex Van Halen, and possibly Sammy Hagar, all putting any egos or hard feelings aside, it's really disappointing in my opinion. There is really no Van Halen without Eddie Van Halen, but I think one last show, a one-off here to pay tribute to Eddie Van Halen's career and legacy from his former bandmates is long overdue as a one-off, so very disappointing. It has not happened yet, and, Wolfgang Van Halen has hinted that there are a lot of ego issues in the way that are preventing it from happening, but no doubt a one-off under the Van Halen name, paying tribute to Eddie Van Halen is something that I would love to see, and I think is long overdue. Another band I feel should not reunite is Led Zeppelin. Now, of course, you have the surviving members of the band, that definitely could get together and do a show in the future, but as time goes on, it's becoming more and more unlikely, on top of the fact that Led Zeppelin will really never be the same without John Bonham, who passed away, decades ago, and that marked the end of Led Zeppelin's career at that point, in 1980. So, a Led Zeppelin reunion at this point would be very interesting, although, I think Robert Plant has said in the past that he has no desire to once again get back on stage as Led Zeppelin with Robert Plant and John Paul Jones. So that's definitely something that's going to, it's not going to happen, but one can dream, although I think that it probably should not take place as far as I'm concerned, because 2007's reunion, right, for Celebration Day was a great farewell for the band, some closure as well, so I don't think it can get any better than that, and now, all these years have passed. It would still be cool, but I don't think they could offer the same that they could back in 2007, certainly not the way that they could back in the 80s, right, with 1980, the last show with John Bonham. So, for me, Led Zeppelin, one of the best rock bands of all time, but to see them do a reunion now, I don't think it's something that, is going to ever happen, but as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty unnecessary and does not need to take place, on top of the fact that, again, Robert Plant has said he has no interest in doing that in the future. Moving into the top 3 now for bands that should, let's go with Sepultura with the Cavalera brothers. Now, Sepultura have just simply not been the same since the departure of the Cavalera brothers, first with Max in 1996, and then Igor a decade later. I think Max does a great job currently with Soulfly, but I think we can all agree that a Sepultura reunion with the Cavalera brothers would be awesome and long overdue, despite the fact that in the past Max has compared his departure of the group to a bad divorce. So, it's unlikely, but stranger things have happened. I know a lot of people would love to see that, myself included. So, coming in at number 3 here for bands that absolutely should get back together, I'd love to see a reunion of Sepultura with the Cavalera brothers sometime in the future, hopefully soon. This one might be a bit unpopular as for bands that should not reunite, but I gotta go with Slayer here. Thrash metal legends, Slayer retired in 2019, and a lot of people felt like maybe they retired a bit too soon. Some of those people have been vocal, like Kerry King and Gary Holt, saying that Slayer had more in the tank, more to offer, and while that might be true, I can't help but feel like Slayer went out at the right time. They still were at the top of their game, so they didn't, stay around too long like some of those bands who stick around around in their older age and they embarrass themselves because they can't play to the best of their abilities anymore, or trying to mask some of their some of the diminishing playing styles and quality about their performance. But as for Slayer, they went out on top as far as I'm concerned. So if you want to, look at the history of Slayer, I think 2019 was the perfect time to end things. Of course, you didn't have Jeff Hanneman, which was very much a blow to the band. So, for them to retire in 2019 and end things while they could still give the fans the best show possible, I think it's admirable of them. I think more bands could learn from Slayer. So, even though there definitely is demand for Slayer to return, and I'm sure, in the future they'll probably do a one-off performance somewhere after them doing a full-on reunion tour, I just don't think it's necessary, because I feel like Slayer, has nothing else to prove, and went out at the right time, like I said before, on top still, while they could still perform and give the fans a great show. Number 2, a band that I'd love to see reunite is King Crimson. All signs seem to point to the fact that the band are done after they lost a ton of money on a tour that was cut short a couple of years ago by the pandemic, but I selfishly would love the opportunity to see King Crimson live, one of the best progressive rock bands of all time. Nobody can play their unique brand of music quite like the originators themselves, and I know everyone in the band is getting older now, and the appeal of touring is probably diminishing, right? There's a lot of practice that has to go into it, but I'd love to see the band finishing strong with their careers with one more farewell tour, not inhibited by the pandemic, and I think that would be awesome. I think a lot of fans would love to see that, to finally close the door on King Crimson in a strong fashion. So for me, they're my number 2 here on the list. Back to the should not reunite category here, I'm going to go with Black Sabbath. Sabbath finished things up on the End Tour, finishing in 2017, and their last record was 13 from 2013. So, Black Sabbath really finished things up at, I think the perfect time, right? They weren't too old where the performance was hampered, but now if you look at Sabbath, Geezer Butler is not an advocate for going back on tour. Tony Iommi, I believe, turned down the offer for them to reunite on the Power Trip tour. And Ozzy is, at this point, Ozzy is not in great health anymore and is supposed to perform Power Trip. And I'm, going to talk a little bit more about this in a little bit here. So spoiler alert for my number 1, bands who should not reunite. I'm going to go with the solo career of Ozzy. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I just feel like, Ozzy is not in the condition to perform live anymore. So, why even bother at this point? Black Sabbath are legends with nothing else to prove to anybody, and the fact that they retired in 2017 and did not have Bill Ward on that tour was a big enough blow at the time as it was. So even if they were to get back together, I highly doubt Bill Ward would be involved at this time. So you factor in the fact that now the band are older now than they were in 2017. Ozzy's got a ton of health issues, and Bill Ward probably would not be included. It's just not worth it. It's best to leave Black Sabbath alone. Coming in at number 1 here for the band that I feel should reunite the most, even though this list wasn't really in any particular order, I did save the one that I feel the strongest about for my number 1 here. Let's go with the original lineup of Kiss as a one-off at their last concert ever at Madison Square Garden this December. Kiss are finally going to put this tour out of their misery, the end of the road tour. They're finally going to be done, which is long overdue as far as I'm concerned, but they're going to finish things off here, as far as we know now, with Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer in the band, with the makeup on, right, impersonating the Cat and the Spaceman. They're charging all of this money for a farewell tour, and this is what we're getting. We're getting the current lineup doing, a fake manufactured show with backing tracks. That just doesn't sit well with me, So as far as I'm concerned, the only proper way for Kiss to go out is with the original 4 guys on stage for the last song, doing rock and roll all night. It has to happen. If it does not go that way, Kiss have done something wrong. I've said this in the past, and I'm going to double down on it now. Ace and Peter absolutely need to be there in the face paint for their last concert ever to finish things out. It has to be done. Of course, now Ace's skills are diminishing on guitar. He's not that lively, anymore in a live setting, but still a fun live show, I guess. Peter doesn't do all that much. But if you look at Kiss, if you look at Paul Stanley can't sing either. So at this point, everybody in the band has kind of lost a step, to say the least. So I think to get the band back together, the original 4 for the final show, even if it's just for an encore, it absolutely has to happen. It's a reunion that is an absolute must for their final show. And again, I'll say this, if they finish the show with, the 4 members of the current lineup, and that's it, they've done something wrong. Well, I think I kind of spoiled this with my last entry for bands who should not reunite here, but coming in at number 1, one act that I feel absolutely should not get back on stage is Ozzy Osbourne as a solo artist. The same way that I did not want Black Sabbath to get back together, Ozzy has nothing left to prove to anybody. He can still continue to make some great studio albums. I think I really enjoyed Patient Number 9, and I like a lot of his 21st century works, probably a lot more than a lot of other people, but when it comes to Ozzy touring these days, after he had officially announced he was done with touring and then announced he was going to be on Power Trip, that big festival coming up, Ozzy should not be touring anymore. He's got severe Parkinson's. He probably cannot stand up for more than like one track. He's probably going to have to sit on a big throne or something like that. But Sharon Osbourne truly will parade him around and tour and make money off of Ozzy until he physically cannot anymore. But when it comes to him doing a live set and him sitting on a big throne, all this kind of all this effort being put in to mask the fact that Ozzy is really not in a great way right now, just seems very unnecessary. Leave Ozzy alone at this point. Let him enjoy his retirement. He's got nothing left to prove to anybody and should not be out there touring, strictly from a health perspective, in my opinion. But Ozzy, was always a great showman, so I wouldn't put it past him to be able to make it work in a throne, sitting on a throne, doing something like that. But do you really want to see that? It's just going to be sad more than anything else, as far as I'm concerned. So for me, I think Ozzy is best left, retired, left alone, and removed from the Power Trip bill. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? And I'll definitely be interested in seeing what the Power Trip set is going to look like when he does perform. I'll be covering Power Trip. I think there are 3 nights, so I'll be covering all 3 nights here on the channel when that does happen this December. But Ozzy is somebody that should not be taking a stage anymore, and I cannot believe he's going to be performing this year at Power Trip. I don't know what that's going to look like. Again, I can only imagine probably going to be sitting on some kind of a throne, but at that point, it shouldn't be happening. So that wraps up this video here, counting down 10 rock and metal bands that should reunite and 5 that shouldn't, which should be visible right over here. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please be sure to share this video around Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you guys would like to share it is greatly appreciated. And please let me know down in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on my ranking here, and what are some bands that you'd love to see reunite, and some bands that you think should remain retired, should not come out of retirement. Let me know all that good stuff down in the comments. I want to hear from you. And until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.